So as we add the spotlight to bring Nigel on screen, great. Nigel Romano is a chartered accountant with extensive experience in public accounting and banking across the globe. He holds a BSc in Management Studies and an MSc in Accounting from the University of the West Indies and an MBA from the Jack Welch Management Institute. He is a chartered accountant and a certified balanced scorecard professional. He started his career with KPMG, where he spent 9 years before continuing a very illustrious career. I will tell you, he shared 15 years in Asia working for Citibank in Indonesia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the Philippines. He returned to Trinidad and Tobago, and before joining more Trinidad and Tobago, where he is at now, he was the managing director and CEO of JMMB Trinidad and Tobago Limited. Currently, apart from being our chairman at CCGI, he's also the chairman of the National Flour Mills Limited, the NIPDEC board, and he also serves on the board of Answer Merchant Bank. Nigel, I am delighted to hand over this panel to you because I know we are going to have some amazing conversations around ISO 37000 standard now.
Thank you very much, Kamala. I'm also looking forward to the conversation. The panel, as you said, is on ISO 37000 governance of organizations and the importance of focusing on purpose. And with me today, I am very pleased to have Ms. Roxanne Forde, RCC Limited's principal consultant. Roxanne specializes in providing practical regulatory compliance solutions and guidance to SMEs in the region, developing and implementing regulatory compliance policies and procedures, including gap analyses and AML risk assessments. Ms. Forde has almost 20 years experience as a compliance professional, delivering customized training for boards of directors, management and staff across industries throughout the Caribbean on regional AML, CFT, CFP legislation, data privacy, FCPA, anti-bribery and corruption, ethical sales practices, and Insurance Act. He's a registered insurance consultant with the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, who has lectured at the Arthur Lockjack Global School of Business, and is currently a member of the faculty at UWI Reutech and the Trinidad and Tobago Insurance Institute. Good afternoon, Roxanne, and welcome. We also have Mr. Jose Edward Trejo, a Belizean national who has spent the last 22 years as a public officer serving the people of Belize. Prior to joining the service, he worked at the Central Bank of Belize as an economist, having direct responsibility compilation of Belize balance of payments statistics. Throughout his career, Jose has worked with several government ministries, including the Ministry of National Resources and the Environment, Trade, Commerce and Industry, Finance, Economic Development, and most recently, Agriculture, Food Security, and Enterprise. During the period 2015 to 2017, he served as the chairman and coordinator of the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, headquartered in Barbados, and the Sub-Regional Central American CAMET grouping of the Inter-American Metrology System, respectively. Jose previously served as the director of the Belize Bureau of Standards during the period 2007 to 2023, and in February of 2023, he assumed duty as the executive director of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. I hope Jose is here with us. If not, hopefully he'll join us soon. Last but not least, we have Daniella O'Connor. Daniella is a legal and governance professional with a career that spans the private legal sector and the financial regulatory environment. She holds a Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of London and an MBA from the University of Bedfordshire. Additionally, she's a member of the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute. Daniella's dedication to compliance and good governance motivated her to establish the Virtue Assist Business and Compliance Hub. which offers consultancy services, education, and training to assist governing bodies and business leaders in ensuring that their governance and leadership practices are participatory, consensus-oriented, accountable, transparent, responsive, effective, efficient, equitable, and inclusive, regardless of the size of the organization. Daniella is also a member of the working committee that is responsible for revising the Trinidad and Tobago Corporate Governance Code. This membership has granted her the unique privilege of meaningfully contributing to the establishment of measures that are intended to promote good and progressive governance at the national level. She's committed to maintaining the use of a platform to raise awareness of the code and the significance of meaningful implementation, thereby ensuring that the principles of good governance are not merely reduced to buzzwords and are given their proper context. Good afternoon, Jose. How are you?
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Romano. Thank you very much. My apologies for being late. I'm just getting back into country, so I'm.
Well, it's good to have you here.
My apologies.
I already made your introduction.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
All right, great. The format is, the topic, of course, is ISO 37000 and the importance of purpose, something that I am very, as Kamla said, very passionate about. So I'll ask Roxanne to lead us off with her thoughts on this topic, and then we'll follow with the others before we get into the conversation. Roxanne.
One of the discussions that I participated in earlier this week, we were talking about board's responsibility for ensuring that messages are clear to the team of management, that they stick on task, and that we talked a lot about responsibility and accountability. And when I was looking through the ISO 37000, one of the things that struck me, you know, the diagram that has all the things and purpose in the center, where we're looking at ethical behavior and we're looking at all those things that are also very nicely related to compliance. I couldn't help but think about it from the point of view of not just, we're here to talk about regenerative capital and understanding purpose, but when boards sits down and teams get together, how often do they really take the moment to remind themselves about purpose? And really and truly, when we talk about, you know, we'll have a mission statement, this statement and that statement. I think, and through the research I was doing on the topic this week, you start realizing that people quite often forget their purpose. So they may be sidelined by philanthropic adventures, profit-making ventures, but always at the core of it all, getting them back to purpose. So when I think about all the various things we're talking about today and conglomerates and really and truly, and I looked at that chart of all the stakeholders and seeing the connectivity between, are you fostering ethical behavior? Do you take time out to foster ethical behavior? How are you encouraging ethical behavior? How are you purposefully encouraging ethical behavior? How are you communicating those strategies and those establishing accountability for purpose at all the different levels of the organization? I've had over many years responsibility for enterprise risk management, for compliance, for HR. And I think my best position in terms of being able to really make that connection and help people make that connection of how we should all be connected on purpose was when I worked in enterprise risk. Something as simple and yet complex as sustainability. When we're talking sustainability throughout an organization, do we leave it at the boardroom level, at managerial level? Is it some special committee? Or at what point do we start having the discussion that includes everyone, so everyone understands what their role in that is? The theme, I'd say, of purpose, to me, and quoting straight from the ISO document, having accountability at all levels, and not just saying we understand who's ultimately responsible and held accountable, but really giving persons an individual piece of the pie and holding them accountable. And of course, always having that tied back into strategy, into nation building, into you know, our organization and the actual impact it's having, not just on our customers, but of course on society at large, on our nation, on our region. And so that part of that ricochet effect on what are you really doing and who are you really affecting is something that I wish more organizations were very conscious about. And that's what I'll say to start.
Thank you very much. So now we'll go to Jose for his thoughts. Jose?
Thank you, Mr. Romano. Well, I would like to start first by speaking to the institution. I mean, the Bureau of Standards is unlike any other institution in, whether you're talking about a developing country or a developed country. It's very unique. There's so many facets to the operations of a national standards body. And having been in this business for over for the last 16 years, I've been in working with a public institution for 22 years, and 16 years out of that was working for the national standards body. And for me, the National Quality Institution holds the golden thread to piece everything together. But for me, I think as a national standards body, I don't know that as a public institution that you can create value without, you can create purpose without, you can create value with understanding your purpose. Mm-hmm. I really think that I've always asked myself this question: if you pluck this institution out of the national setting, who would miss us? Right? Who would really institution is gone, and if you close it down tomorrow? So for me, if you ask yourself that question, it allows you to reflect and to have that inflection about the value of the institution and understanding what the institution was meant to do. And as Ms. Forde just mentioned quite eloquently, I think it starts at all facets. It's at every layer, because having been here in Trinidad and Tobago for the last 15 months, I think one of the first things that one of the first engagement I had with the staff here was, when you walk through the doors every single day, you have to understand what the purpose of the organization is. But I think you cannot cultivate and create that purpose if at the very top of the structure, the governing body does not understand its purpose. And why I started out with speaking about the institution and the role of the national standards body, because the NSB it cannot be a skip rope. I don't know if you remember in the days of the skip rope and you just jump in. The National Quality Institution is not like that. For you to come into the role as in the governing body, you have to understand what the institution was meant to do. The Bureau of Standards has a responsibility to protect the welfare of the state, also the responsibility to also balance that out with private sector development, ensuring competitiveness, bolstering production and innovation. And I think that it is very important for us to understand the directors or any governing body can't just jump into that role. They have to understand it. And I think that with changes, it's difficult for you to pluck someone out of an environment. And no, I don't mean anything against the profession, but if you have a lawyer and you put a lawyer in the position of the national standards body, I think it's not something that you can easily transition to. And I think that governing bodies, not just for the Bureau, but for any institution, have to be well steeped in the national setting and understanding the roles of institutions and what they're meant to do. I don't know that in the case of a national standards body that's easily understood. In the case of measurements and quality systems, I'm not so sure. That's not the day-to-day language, you know. So my view of I love the fact that, and Ms. Forde said it as well, and I fell in love with this standard when I saw it for the first time, because I think it is the standard for any institution, whether it's public or private, to be able to navigate on a day-to-day basis in terms of their operations, in terms of their strategy, in terms of the human resources, in terms of what their contributions could be or potentially be in terms of national contribution. So I think it is, funny enough, I travel with the standard in my bag. Wherever I go, I have the standard with me, because I think it's a constant reminder of ensuring that you keep to the tenets of what the standard actually requires you to do. So for me, I think it's if the standard of all standards, although the ISO has over some 27,000 standards, I think this is the one that for me helps to put institutions on the right platform.
Thank you very much. So now we'll invite Daniella to opine on the standard. Daniella.
Thank you, Mr. Romano. So I really wanted to set the stage for how we understand the ISO 37000 in the context of groups of companies. So I pulled 2 local groups of companies. One of them is Massey, one of our gold sponsors. And Massey spans the motors and machines, gas products, financial services, and integrated retail industries. Another group of companies spans the automotive, beverage construction, distribution, financial services, manufacturing, media, real estate, retail, and services industries. Now, this gives us an understanding of the diversity in subsidiaries that groups of companies have to navigate. And they must have an overarching purpose, a clear overarching purpose. And if embedding purpose into a standalone organization is difficult, we understand the unique challenge that groups of companies face where purpose is concerned. So the ISO 37000 has purpose at its core, as Roxanne mentioned. And the purpose is the foundation for good decision-making. Purpose can be defined as a clear statement that defines the group or conglomerate's reason for being. And it takes into consideration the impact on stakeholders, the society, and it really allows the company to look beyond profit. But like I said, there are lots of challenges in embedding purpose. in relation to diversity of interests, right? Each subsidiary would have different goals. They would have their individual purposes that would also need to be integrated with the group purpose. They have to meet the needs of their very unique stakeholders, and there are so many other factors that as subsidiaries they have to consider. Having a clear plan to implement the purpose and really measure the effectiveness of purpose when you're trying to implement it in across so many different industries with each with their own uniqueness. And of course, communication is always a challenge, especially when you need to ensure that your communication is tailored so that all of your stakeholders can be reached. But there are benefits, right, of embedding purpose. So when we embed purpose across the group, we have all of your subsidiaries having strategic alignment, the decision-making would be improved, and you could better manage representation across the group and the representation of the main company as a whole. And I mean, last but not least, motivation. Anybody who feels a sense of connection to something would be motivated. If your employees feel a sense of connection to your purpose, they'll be motivated to really work toward achieving the greater goal. So I'll take it back around to the ISO 37000 and some of the ISO principles that they really stood out to me in the context of purpose. And funny enough, in Derek's presentation this morning, I realized that a lot of the principles that stood out in the context of purpose were also highlighted in his risk presentation. And it sort of brought to the fore that governance is really a puzzle. Everything is inextricably linked. And the puzzle would be incomplete without any of the pieces. So in leadership, leadership is ISO Principle 1. The governing body must set the tone. The tone must be set at the top. We have heard this several times today. And the tone is set through communication. And even more importantly, when we consider leadership in the context of groups of companies, we have to ensure that in selection, training, even any interaction with the subsidiary leaders, the leaders of the subsidiaries must be continuously engaged by the governing body to ensure that the overarching purpose is understood and achieved. Engagement of stakeholders, ISO Principle 4, all right? All of the stakeholders must be continuously engaged because everybody must understand the purpose and how it would benefit everyone in order for us to be able to truly help the organization realize its purpose. We have ISO Principle 5, fairness and equity. The purpose of the organization and how that purpose is achieved must reflect the diverse interests of all the subsidiaries. I like to think of it as you're on a football field and the purpose is the goal. Even as you go across the length of the field, any action that you take, every single play that you make, none of them would count unless when you get to the end, that goal hits the back of the net. All right, we have sustainability and long-term value creation, which is ISO Principle 6. It requires us to adopt environmentally responsible practices, and all of these should be reflected across the group of companies so that the overall purpose in terms of the long-term impact on society and the environment is clearly communicated at all times. And I would like to say, as I speak about ISO Principle 9, transparency and disclosure, even though we have all of this information in our annual reports and disclosures, and we have a nicely articulated purpose on paper, in this age of cancel culture, it is so important for organizations to be truly authentic, because it is so much easier for everyone to hold organizations accountable when it comes to how they actually behave in comparison to their stated purpose. And lastly, compliance with law and regulations. All right, it is extremely important governing the overarching governing body has accountability for ensuring that each and every subsidiary has the relevant regulations, etc., in mind as they operate, and that they are always compliant, right? Compliance is ISO Principle 10, right? Once organizations leverage ISO 37,000 principles, they can achieve the goal of embedding their purpose and really leverage that purpose to drive their strategic alignment, motivate their employees, and really just lay the foundation for the institution's long-term success. And I would leave you with a very short story about to kind of highlight the importance of purpose and communication of purpose. So we have Martha and Brian, and they came together to bake a pie. They were very good at what they did. They were awesome, popular bakers. But Martha liked cherry and Brian liked ginger and blueberry. So Martha made her fancy crust, and she created her crust to complement this lovely cherry filling because cherry was her favorite flavor. Then Brian came and he didn't ask a question, and he stuffed Martha's cherry intended crust with his lovely ginger filling. When the judges bit into that pie and they tasted that clash of cherry and ginger, needless to say, Martha and Brian lost the competition. They both wanted the same thing. They wanted to win. They were both excellent at what they did, but they did not communicate the steps that they intended to take to achieve their goal of winning the competition, and nobody won. So if purpose is not clearly defined, if it's not clearly communicated, the steps that you take don't matter. Nobody wins when purpose is not clear.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. So I have a follow-up question for you immediately. The purpose was to win. Is that a purpose? Or is that an outcome? And Kamla shared a video from Calhoun, and I suspect his objective was also to win. But is winning a purpose?
It's a catch-22. Because especially in business, I mean, what you think you need to win, if that is your only consideration, like what is victory to you? If that is the only thing that you consider, then you start as a loser. Because in business, you're not catering to yourself, right? Winning would be an outcome if the execution is sound. But it's a meaningless
the point is, if you focus on winning without the context of purpose and value, you're down a slippery slope. That's my opinion. So how would you respond to that?
I do agree that if you focus on winning, and that is your only focus, with you focus on winning without context, then you run the high risk of losing. But if you focus on winning and you communicate in advance how you're going to achieve that win, then it's a sure thing, right? I think it depends on how you look at it. I understand what you're saying, in that you think the purpose is the step after the idea. So you want to win, that's what you want. But purpose is how you intend to achieve it. And that is what must be communicated.
No, purpose is not the how. Purpose is the overarching, why you exist. The how is your strategy to do that. But let me hear from the others. Let's hear from Roxanne either one of you or Jose can jump in. We
Well,
can talk about it.
in support of my sister here, the communication, I love your pie example. And what I said in my brief opening, that the importance of, and I know we beat the tone at the top to death this week. If we, but it is what it is, you know. If the tone at the top is not just set, but communicated properly. So if, what were our pie makers' names? If the two of them had collaborated sufficiently prior and had proper understanding of the purpose, of their goal, of where they were going, of what they were really about, and communicated clearly and had to be able to see eye to eye. And that takes us back to what we were talking about when you say, yes, your purpose is your why. So what Daniella said and what I fully agree with, to some, when you have a large organization, and I've worked in quite a few, the purpose is profit over here. To this department, the purpose is reducing our carbon footprint. Somewhere else, the purpose will be for delivering the best customer service we can. And in doing this, what sometimes it puts people at odds. I was trying to read Mr. Small's comment, but I couldn't quite catch it so quickly.
I have it. I'll read it for you after. Go ahead.
In large organizations, it puts people literally against each other, and they forget the purpose. They forget what the tone at the top was really about, because it's the same reason when I think of organizations that I work and I help through with compliance. Of course, everybody wants to be compliant. Everybody wants to be on the right side of the angels. Everybody wants to do what's right. But at the end of the day, the conflict exists with who are you pleasing first? If you don't meet your targets, you won't get, you won't shine. You won't make, you won't be the star. There's no bonus for your department. On the other hand, if you don't reduce your carbon footprint, you're not, or you don't make public efforts to do so, it's not going to seem like your company has purpose at all. So when we think and we talk about understanding and committing purpose, I think purpose has to be multifaceted. And we have to have multiple purposes. We can't be successful trying to have one purpose. I don't believe.
I disagree with you, but let's hear from Jose. Jose.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Go ahead, Jose.
Very interesting, and thank you so much. Well, I don't see it as winning, so I'm going to be right in the middle. I don't see it as about winning. And if I could come back to what I had said earlier, is that, you know, the institution here is responsible to make life safer and to improve the well-being of the state. So our job is to make sure that we fulfill that mandate. Is about ensuring that what we do makes a difference for society. It makes a difference for our economy. So if I could speak to the economic growth, if you can show that the investment that is made into the institution plays out into the economy in terms of growing businesses and making sure that we can compete, we can trade, we can do those things. And if I flip it on the other side, to make sure that we have a program, say for example, good housing. I mean, we need to ensure that the standards that we are putting in place are relevant to society, so that in the construction of of a home. There's as a code, building code, electrical code, or plumbing code, everything that comes together. So I think that that to me is what purpose translates to. It translates to the fact that what you do has impact, and the winning for me is the outcome. So I see in the grander scheme of things, and like I said, if you pluck out an institution like the Bureau of Standards today, what are we missing? And if you don't have an answer to that, it means there is no value in that institution, and that's how I see it.
And I think that's the bottom line. What value are you creating, and who are you creating that value for? That's the first question that has to be answered. So in the case of your competition, the value that was being created or should have been created is a very tasty pie for the judges. That's how you define your purpose, not winning. If you do that right, you should win, or you may compete better. Maybe you can come first, second, or third. The point is that you have to first focus on creating value. That's the first step. The next step is to do that as efficiently as possible, so you capture enough of that value for your stakeholders, your employees, your suppliers, your shareholders. For me, if you don't have that clearly laid out, and you don't have the guide rails, the values, how are you going to achieve that purpose? You're going to be in trouble. You're going to end up shortchanging people because you're not focused on the value creation first. You focus on the profitability first. If you focus on profitability first, your lifespan is going to be very, very short. That's my opinion, by the way. Let me just read what David said. He said, this is interesting. The pursuit of winning can be very detrimental to the external and internal stakeholders. Winning tends to suggest others losing, and therein lies my challenge. And for me, if you start by winning as opposed to creating value, win-win. So I create value for you, and I do so in a way that I can capture enough for myself, then both of us win. In the case of the Bureau of Standards, for me, their whole thing is to ensure that consumers are protected by knowing that building codes are followed, or disclosure requirements are followed, so that when I buy, when people manufacture food, etc., there is I can trust, because they have this. You certified people, Jose. You give them a stamp of approval.
Yes, we do have certification schemes, both personal and plant certification schemes.
So that stamp of approval tells me that I can trust. Without that stamp of approval, there may be a different situation. But I want to hear your pushback.
On the winning, I think that you said something very important just a short while ago, which is building trust. Because I think that's how you. I mean, I'm stuck with creating value. I mean, I'm stuck with ensuring that that if you do what you're supposed to do, you build that trust for your stakeholders. You are fulfilling the needs of the stakeholders. And I think that the more you fulfill your need, or the needs for the stakeholder, whether it's internal or external, I think you can easily find your center. It's easier for you to find that center, which is understanding what that purpose is on a quarterly basis, on a month-to-month, on a yearly basis, as you project forward. So I think that to me is very, very important in understanding.
Daniella?
In fact, one of the things.
Roxanne, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things I noted in doing my research, going through the ISO document, we're looking at purpose, and they say ideally that the fundamental purpose is the fundamental reason an organization exists beyond making a profit. Yeah. Of course, we know what's difficult quite often is really communicating that purpose. But once that is established and everyone understands, yes, everybody's in business to make a plus. And actually taking the work, I think it's a lot of work that has to be done to really enable an organization to live up to its purpose. So because we have to talk about not just from a decision-making point of view and letting it be a part of the strategy. It has to be an inherent part of the strategy that everyone is able to understand. Yes, we're a for-profit business, but herein lies our purpose. And that purpose has to be able, you have to take the time, do the hard work to help align that purpose with the actions that the organization actually takes on various issues, tying it back into mission and core values, and especially when it's entered into new markets, uncertain environments. Those are parts of that recommitment to purpose and making sure, I'm not sure if it was Jose who just said, even if you have to revisit it quarterly, because it will get lost. In my world, it's why people do AML training. We do compliance training. We commit to a culture of compliance annually because people get carried away in the other wealth building, profit growing activities. We just also spoke about trust. When we talk about stakeholder trust, if you have a purpose that's clear and well communicated, whether it comes across in your marketing, in your environmental and social government projects, having that obvious, open, communicatable agenda will also help by showing that your stakeholders, your customers, your investors, all your shareholders, your constituents, your employees, showing them that you are actually committed to something other than profit.
Daniella?
I just wanted to circle back to something that Roxanne said in terms of aligning purpose with decision making, etc. I think it's the other way around. Your decision making should align with your purpose. And I think that changing an organization's purpose is a very serious undertaking and should not be done. It's not a decision that should be taken very lightly. There must be a great need identified to consider changing an organization's purpose. I want to just use, again, using our gold sponsor as an example a lot today. So Massey's purpose is a force for good, creating value, transforming life. When you think about that purpose, I cannot think of any reason that any decision that Massey has to make in meeting its obligations to any of its stakeholders, no matter who that stakeholder is, like regardless of the peculiarities, Massey could cater to any generation in any area of their operation, and tailor their strategy to be a force for good, create value, and transform life. And if it comes down to Massey having to change this purpose, then there should be extreme stakeholder engagement and they will then have the opportunity to engage the subsidiary leaders across the board. But the key is to adapt and tailor your strategies and decision making to your purpose. Because if you stick to your purpose, you are better able to leverage your authenticity.
So one of my gurus, one of the people that I I always go to for guidance in these situations. Jim Collins describes purpose as follows: the fundamental reason for the organization's existence. It grows out of core values. It's like a guiding star, always worked towards but never fully attained. And it should serve to guide the company for 100 years. Purpose is serious business. And spending the time to define purpose is a very serious exercise, because it is the guidance. And notice what he says, it comes out of your core values. And those core values come out of the leader's core values, because that guides behavior, and it says, this is what we will do, this is what we will not do. This is our guiding principle. And for me, that was, and like Jose, for me, the ISO 37000 is one of the, I think it's a brilliant standard, because if you really embed it and really study it and put the various principles in place, you should be in good shape. But and a lot of people talk about mission. Purpose is not mission. Purpose is your fundamental reason for existing. And then with the core values, then you focus on your current mission. But it's very, very interesting. Responsive thought.
I love that he acknowledges that purpose is never fully attained.
Never fully attained. Always work towards.
Yes, because it really challenges organizations to have a certain level of self-awareness. It really challenges leaders to be self-aware and understand that you could never get so carried away in believing that you have this down to a science. The world is constantly evolving. So what is required to achieve that purpose would constantly evolve as well. I really love that.
Yeah. So when you look at Massey's, this is their purpose. This is what they say their purpose is: force for good, creating value, transforming lives. Now that is broad enough so that each division, each company in the group can define how they're going to create that value, right, for themselves, so that it may be more specific in a specific division, and how they're going to transform lives. What do you think? Do you think that is a good purpose?
I think
Go ahead, anyone.
I should have waited.
Can you repeat that again?
Engaging one. It's an engaging one, at least.
Yeah, it's force for good, creating value, transforming lives.
I really do think it's a great purpose. And okay, so in, let's say, deciding what types of cars they want to sell, who they want to cater to, how they want to treat, what is their HR strategy in terms of how their employees. Massey Gas, Massey Finance, Massey Stores, everybody can figure out how they want to do this. But at the end of the day, they are accountable in ensuring that they are a force for good, they create value, and they
transform lives.
Right? So every subsidiary can cater to all of their stakeholders. But at the end of the day, this is their purpose.
Roxanne, you're on mute.
One of the things I was thinking through, they say when you have clear purpose, and I'm going to switch back to my notes for a second. When you have clear purpose, they say purpose-driven organizations are better equipped to identify and manage risk. It's easier for them to focus on ethical behavior I saw someone write in the chat about the importance of ethical behavior, and it also reduces regulatory misconduct. If you have a purpose, as we just rightly using Massey as the example, if Volkswagen, for example, had a purpose that was clearly communicated, that they were really intending to change emission controls, there was no way that those engineers in the Volkswagen scandal could have all commiserated to lie to multiple governments, ending in a recall of over 500,000 cars. They said they were into that they were interested in it, or their reason was to create a safer, a better environment. So as a result, they're going to reduce emissions, and that seemed at the time to be part of their purpose, that they were seeking sustainability. But in truth and in fact, that was lip service. And out of that example, and I wanted to use this as an example of having purpose and losing your way. As a result of that, they were so focused in that story they were trying to sell that when they didn't meet that goal or that objective, they cheated. And, you know, they pretended they were meeting it. And so that's the flip side of pushing purpose and not thinking you have buy-in, but not really having it. So that feedback, being able to also encourage ethical behavior, so that you're not, you know, so on the one hand, they say if you are a purpose-driven organization, and you do it right and you do it well, it will reduce the risk of unethical behavior. It will reduce the risk of misconduct. But there are enough examples, such as the one I just gave you with Volkswagen, to show where on a multinational stage, they were communicating this urge to improve the environment by reducing emissions. And yet still, when they couldn't do it, they couldn't face the music of the reality and go back from scratch. They then chose to be fraudulent about it. One of the other things about purpose and creating value for society, when, such as Massey, I'm a Massey fan, so you picked the right company. Yes. When you talk about creating value for society, showing your social, your social your corporate social responsibility, showing that side, showing up, so that your employees, all your stakeholders, your employees, your customers, they don't just have lip service, but that they see you showing up in places where they don't expect you to be, or the places that become where you are expected to be, whether it's in the beach cleanup, those things, you know, these are types of things that they do, and we would notice as being a customer. They had not a great, didn't have good success, but I applauded them when they tried to do the recycling so that people could recycle with points, because I feel like I'm the only person on my entire block who cares about recycling. I'm seen driving out of my driveway with my car piled up with bags of bottles, because that's part of my purpose, to reduce my carbon footprint. So sometimes you have, you make attempts to do things and they go awry, but it's how you deal with it, how you stay on course, how you align all your practices, and whether they are by having stated environmental goals, sustainability goals. I think if you are not making those things a part of your purpose, a tangible part of your purpose, then you know you're not going to last for that purpose is not going to carry the next 100 years. So I like that point you made about you never really fulfill your purpose, because it means we keep going, we keep trying to do better. The bar keeps moving, and that's just a mirror of how life and how all the good things in life really are. You know, when you're done, what's next? So it has to be something that you continue to go towards, that you continue to redefine. and make better, you know, not absolutely make better. And one more point about leadership. So we have to be sure the people who we are taking with us on this journey, who's espousing our purpose. So we understand that there's purpose, then there's mission, then there's vision, then there's strategy, and purpose is up here. It's our fundamental reason for being. If at the selection, at recruitment and selection stage, we are not careful to choose, and I said a bit of an HR background, choose the type of people whose personalities, whose values really reflect our purpose, that is also something. So we get people because they're successful. We bring two big names. Oh, this guy had a lot of success in this company and that company. And we bring them because of their successes in their industry, and they can help us to get where we're going. Those internal, those competencies, such as, you know, your nation building, those types of competencies where people really care about those things. If you don't drill down enough to be sure that these high performance management types are right fit for you, that too can stymie you from achieving your purpose. The recruitment and selection aspect of who you put on your team, I think has a lot also to do with your ability to uphold your company's purpose, and not at all to be underestimated.
Very much so. The point though is that one also needs, I believe, to measure how you're doing, so that the core value, in addition to purpose, your values need to be very, very clear. And lying and cheating cannot be acceptable ever. And then the importance of encouraging whistleblowing, so that when somebody sees people not in compliance with those values, they raise their hand, and you don't win at the cost of going against your core values or destroying the ability to trust the organization. So those are very, 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 very clear. David Small, Avia, and the others. I'll now open it up for others to join us in the conversation. David, why don't you come in and talk to us, and so that we can all hear from you?
I was trying not to get involved in the conversation. I wanted to just...
No, man. I mean, you're trying not to get involved in the conversation. You're part of the conversation. So let's hear from you.
He posted a 10,000 word text, and he doesn't want to be part of the conversation.
Talk to us.
Just a few words. I'm loving the discussion here, because, you know, I like hearing from the different perspectives about how we see organizations and what an organization's purpose is. And I will tell you, I know organizations today that their purpose, I know for a fact, their purpose is profit, full stop.
Yes.
And, exactly. And if the employees suffer, the environment suffers, they really have little to no, it doesn't bother them in the slightest. And then you have organizations who purport that they're looking after the environment and doing the other good things. And then that's, if you really examine it, it's not all there. I think it's important that we have this type of discussion helps me to frame that when organizations say things, they have to understand where we are in the world today. You know, the frame about always looking at what's going on in your business and trying to make sure you do the best is great. But that can't be the whole discussion, because whatever you think is good for your business, you have to now measure how that impacts others outside of your what's your core business. How that impacts the environment, impacts the people who live in the community around you, okay? And these are the things that I'm not sure to the extent where there's full discussion on these things. There may be a passing discussion, but whether there's a full discussion about, hey, you know, we need to do this better. It might cost us a bit more, but it's going to impact the environment less, or it's going to be less noisy for the people on the fence line. You know, these are the kind of things that I am not sure where the organizations, do they really give it value, or is it given
Lip
just in a
service.
chain of discussion, then we move on.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's why when I honed in on winning, because I know I winning, there's a phrase that ticks me, because I'm like, okay, anytime organizations think about winning, I start to look at them differently, because winning means others losing. The winning winning suggests that there's a winner, and then there's second, third, fourth, and when you're winning, your focus is only on you. That is what it suggests generally to me. I may be wrong. So, and I'm not saying that it's wrong for a company to win. They should try to win, but in winning, it's how. It's how.
Mhm. No, and the point is, I am the other guru for me is Stephen Covey, and the objective must be win-win, so that I am creating value. That's the first objective. The other one is to do so in a way that allows me to capture enough of that value for my employees, I can afford my suppliers, and I can provide a healthy return to my shareholders. And in the context of the communities in which you operate, you cannot ignore that. Then if you do, you're not talking long-term profitability or long-term sustainability. You're talking about, like a con man, you dig out the eye and then you run. It's not sustainable. And that
that's the problem,
sustainability is a critical thing.
In this part of the world, it's just what you're saying there, that they could dig out the eye and run, and then it close down. They tend to have longer legs in this part of the world than other places. The con man approach, like using your words.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something when you were speaking a couple of minutes about trust, and people lying. When people are not, trust, I think I attended a session from Kamala's group, Kamala's tremendous training. The guy said, listen, TTT, in order for there to be trust, there needs to be transparency and there needs to be truth. If you don't have truth and you don't have transparency, there could never be trust. So somebody telling me trust me, that's interesting. I go back to Ronald Reagan days. I trust, but I need to verify. Yeah. So
and
I'm gonna stop here, but I shared my notes.
No, thank you very much for your contribution. Anybody want to respond to David?
Well, I wanted to add, I think that for me, this is an issue of whether it's public or private. It's a matter of the return on investment. And I think that if I look at this institution here, I'm thinking about how the public image and how they view the institution. Is it that the taxpayers' money is well spent? Right? Because at the end of the day, you have to show, there has to be evidence that the investment made is yielding an outcome, having an impact at the national level. And for me, I think one of the most difficult things to do is to ensure that you're measuring, you are constantly monitoring the level of impact that you're having. I think for me that's it goes back to the question you asked earlier about Massey's their mission. Unless they're measuring it, I am not adept to Massey in terms of the company, but unless you have some way of showing that impact and measuring and monitoring, and you can see that the institution, the company is doing what it says it's meeting that fundamental purpose, then it's in the right place. So for me, it's the most difficult thing is how do you measure, and purpose is a very difficult, it's a very, very difficult thing when some things that we do is implicit and intrinsic. It's not an explicit thing that translates directly. Like in the case of a private company, where at the end of the day, you're looking at whether or not you're in a good place in terms of profit, right? So I think that to me is one of the major challenges, measuring and ensuring that you're having the impact that you say you're having.
Very much so. The measurement piece is critical, but it's also very difficult. as you said, especially in your organization, but things like how many violations are there? How many people have been adversely affected or not, as the case may be? You have to spend some time really getting very creative about how you measure, so that you ensure that you are achieving your purpose. Very difficult, but very, very important. The difficulty should not deter you from being working with your teams, especially whether they are internal, your customers in this case, the people who have to comply with the standards, the people who have to enforce the standards, the people who are maybe affected by the standards. How do you get them involved in a very creative conversation about measurement, and then using that to monitor your performance? Very, very important. Anybody else in the audience that let's call them that, would like to jump in and questions, comments?
If I may.
Don't be shy. Go ahead, Daniella.
I just wanted to, as Mr. Small came in and he was talking about trust and, measurements, and you yourself would have mentioned before whistleblowing. And I feel like one of the areas that companies really get to skate on is the treatment of their internal stakeholders, their employees, because we don't have whistleblower legislation, and many private companies do not have whistleblower policies. And I think that if we understood how some of these companies treat their employees, they would lose our trust. And I think that is one of the most difficult things to measure, and it has an impact on so many things. We always complain about customer service. And I think that if we had a front seat view of how organizations with bad customer service treated their internal stakeholders, it would explain the level of customer service in a nutshell. I think one of the things that really needs some level of discussion is how organizations can be held to account, so that we could monitor, evaluate, and compel them to revisit their HR practices and their HR standards. So we don't just see words hidden away in an annual report and some buzzwords and some checklists, but we don't really know what was, we have nothing to measure how they treat the persons who are ultimately responsible for achieving this purpose. We only see on the outside all the pretty things that they choose to show us, and we believe that they are living up to their purpose.
The point, though, is that if you treat your people badly and they treat your customers badly, you're not going to be in business for long, at least not very profitably. And that's the catch-22. Anybody who thinks in that kind of short-term kind of fashion is their demise is not too far into the future. Roxanne, your thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of
Yeah,
things
go ahead.
was actually going through my mind. To add on to what you were saying about whistleblowing, and that's that's one of my genuine pet peeves, that we don't value some of the technological advances that we can add to our employee and customer experience. People are afraid of whistleblowing when it's something that they should really welcome. But beyond whistleblowing, I think just regularly engaging your stakeholders, your customers and your employees. So to understand their needs as it relates to your purpose. In the same way, you have to revisit your purpose, because sometimes your purpose may no longer be relevant. You know, things may change, whether it is through climate change or through a change in values or a change in politics, a change in just something in your external or perhaps internal environment. You may have to change. Your purpose may need to change. The purpose that you set out for may no longer serve you. But the only way you would know that is literally by actually reviewing how you're doing in implementing your purpose along your stakeholders, along your employees. Because sometimes you may have to refine and redirect your purpose. And I say that, and there are several case studies I was looking at of how people have had to change because either whatever your purpose was before is no longer politically correct, or it may clash with environmental goals. It's also important to note that purpose, as you say, going along with what you said about it being unattainable, it also, there are times when you have to either recommit or abandon, you know, but that can only happen if you stay in touch with your stakeholders. Going back to the whistleblowing, sometimes when you have whistleblowing mechanisms in place, that's the only way you get to understand the stress, the strain, the things that people take seriously that you thought meant nothing or you thought were minor, and that perhaps are actually working against your purpose, but you have no way of finding out. We don't have whistleblowing, but one of the things that we can all have is a feedback loop that involves allowing employees to anonymously complain in the same way you allow customers to complain. But generally to give feedback, and it doesn't have to be a complaint. It could be positive feedback of what you're doing that's right. Having that quiet voice, allowing people to be able to share and enhance culture in the workplace in ways that would not highlight or make them feel vulnerable. So anonymous is generally the best way to do it. And people look at those things like, you know, part of quality circles and all those things of the past. Oh, we're gone past that. You know, now everybody is using social media. Everything is what it is. Everything is literal out there in your face. Those type of strategies could work against you. Those type of strategies will have you running all over the place and perhaps losing sight of purpose, you know? So it really is a lot to think about on the issue, but I think it has to be part of continuous improvement. So you have to review and refine your purpose to be sure it stays relevant. I think that's very important. Going back to the tone at the top, I also think I mentioned about who you hire and that they should be able to mirror your purpose, not just by who they are coming in, but by how they lead when they're in the position. You have to have leaders that are purposeful in what they do. And when I say purposeful, I mean they are walking the walk, talking the talk. They have to be able to demonstrate their commitment to whatever the organization's purpose is. I don't have the answers, all the answers for how you do that, but I strongly feel whenever there was a set of values, and I'm thinking of a few big organizations I worked in, where the leaders' values don't trickle down, or people don't understand or don't feel they're a part of it, it's hard for them to connect. Years ago, I worked at a department store, a leading department store as manager of employment at Barney's, New York. And I remembered when I went there to work, I thought, my God, I can't afford these clothes. This is crazy. People actually spend this kind of money. And I was the manager of employment. It was my job to hire people, to bring them into this organization. And they said to me, so we know you're used to traditional recruiting, How we recruit people is by going out and shopping for them. And I will never forget that part of my job was to go to all sorts of places and see how people treated me. And if they treated me well, we could invite them to come and work at Barney's. And I never forget that, because you could recruit people from paper and they could have all the best references. They could have all the things that they say, but hiring that person who espouses your values, that leads with their heart and really match what you do and what you want to project, is so important. Now, it's not so easy that we could try out executives the same way, but certainly we could read what they write. We could see who they support. We could see what they stand for. And I think that, and I love this ISO thing. Last weekend, I kind of spent a lot of time going through it, and it really gives you food for thought. I think all organizations who want to go somewhere and get there the right way should really read through and try to pick where they can make commitments. Yeah, I could say lots more, but that's what I want to say for now. That, and really understanding the tone at the top. If if leadership doesn't emphasize this purpose sufficiently, it will get lost.
So you went shopping for people.
Yes, I used to go shopping for people. That was my job.
That's very interesting.
That was my job. That was my job.
Perspective. And I suppose you follow the mantra, when people showed you who they are, you believe them.
You believe them, absolutely. And there were lots of people who didn't get my card after I shopped them. And then there were those, and quite often, Nigel, how they treated me was only a fraction of how good they treated other people. I made some very excellent choices. And yes, if we could apply that to many more situations, we don't get that luxury all the time.
No, but going back to Jim Collins, he puts it, he says, first who, then what. So in any organization, before you start talking about strategy, you have to make sure you have the right people in the room, in the right roles, and before you start talking about strategy. But let me we have about 6 minutes left. I'll let you all wrap up. What are your closing thoughts on this whole issue? And we'll go in reverse order. We'll start with you, Daniella.
I think that the ISO 37000 really provides some invaluable guidance in terms of how a purpose-driven approach, the importance of a purpose-driven approach, and how a purpose-driven approach could be embedded and implemented. And I'm confident that a lot of the principles that would allow organizations to really adopt this purpose-driven approach are also further articulated in the revised version of our National Corporate Governance Code. And I think that with a champion of purpose as the head of the CCGI and the invaluable guidance that would be provided by the Corporate Governance Code, our organizations would have some valuable purpose weapons in their arsenal to allow them to really have some meaningful governance structures and really enhance governance across Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to ask Mr. Romano for a reading list, because all of the quotes and all of the examples, all of the examples on that library behind you, they have me excited. So I think I'll need to beg for a reading list.
Yeah, no worries, anytime. Jose, the rose, the thorn between the two roses.
Yes, thank you. I don't know that one. Well, as I listen into the exchanges, I'm thinking about the Bureau as a national institution, it's going to be 50 on July 8th. 1974, it was established. And while it might, I guess, probably might sound like an easy task, because its role is cemented in law, in legislation. So it has no way out of it. It was established for a particular reason. So for me, over the last 50 years, I would say that the purpose has been set for it 50 years ago. I go back to so part of the discussion is that, of course, the institution is not what it was 50 years ago, because the needs of society, the markets, the trends were quite different. We are now in a different age of digitalization. We're now in an age of transformation and what have you. So the task of the institution is to ensure that no matter how much the market evolves and changes, that it remains true to that purpose of why it was established. So I think for us, it's the standard. Really, for me, it allows us to keep close to that understanding of why we exist, why the importance of the institution to the 1.5 million people in Trinidad and Tobago. I think that's the figure. If it's not 1.4, it's almost reaching 1.5. But we have to make sure that we understand that on a day-to-day basis that we fulfill this mandate, and this standard certainly is at the nucleus of understanding why an institution like this has purpose and relevance for our society and economy.
Thank you. So Roxanne, you open, now you're going to close the button. Hopefully you'll hit a 6.
It'll be a quiet close. I think it goes without saying that if you for you to have effective governance and any amount of success, any palpable amount of success, your purpose has to be one that is clear, that is shared, that benefits all your stakeholders. It can't benefit them all equally, but they're all considered in that purpose. Because it, as we've discussed today, it affects trust, it affects your ability to operate sustainably. It will, if you're not able to build purpose into your governance program, it will hinder you from progress. It is, and especially the way the upcoming generations, how they think about the world of work, how they view the role of the organization in their life or not. I think it's important that you understand the articulation of your purpose. It can't be like a quiet kept secret. If it's one thing, I think I gleaned from all the reading, it can't be a quiet kept secret because it won't be achieved. It has to be heavily, strongly, not just communicated, but felt. It has to become tangible. And also, as with anything, revisited and understood, so that as one of the things they said is that organizations who clearly define and communicate their purpose do better in terms of employee morale, in terms of customer complaints, and in terms of overall stakeholder satisfaction. So it seems to me you can do nothing other than follow these guidelines and recommit to having purpose that's clear, understandable, and well communicated. It will help align the organization, their goals, the strategies, all those things come after purpose. and it will help to keep them in alignment if purpose is clearly communicated. So that people say, that's not just lip service. They say that's what they're about, but we're not seeing it. And people notice, customers notice. If you say that's what you're about, and I'm going to go back to Daniella's Massey analogy. They say that's what they're about, and I've never think until today I'd actually heard it. But when you said it, it resonated with me when I think of all the different things that they do, all the different places their tentacles reach, that they really do try to live up to that. And so that was an excellent example. And I thank you, Kamala, for having me here today. I thank you all for this engaging discussion. We can do this more often.
Thank you all very much. It has been a pleasure, and I look forward to more interactions going forward.